Tonight at 12:15.
I need another 1,000.
I admire your courage, Miss...
Trench. Sylvia Trench. I admire your luck, Mr.
Bond. James Bond.
Good morning. My name's Bond. James Bond.
Don't move, Mr. Bond.
Good afternoon.
Can I help you?
Yes, my name is Bond. James Bond. I'm looking for Dr. Goodhead.
You just found her.
A woman?
Your powers of observation do you credit, Mr. Bond?
James. To my friends.
And those are three of his friends, Sean Connery, George Lazenby, and Roger Moore, the three men who played one of the most durable movie heroes of all time, Special Agent James Bond. And on this special edition of At the Movies, we'll be taking a critical look at 007. Across the aisle from me is Gene Siskel, film critic of the Chicago Tribune.
That's Siskel, Gene Siskel. And this is Ebert, Roger Ebert, film critic of the Chicago Sun-Times. Everyone would love to be able to say Bond, James Bond. Johnny Carson did it in one of his monologues not too long ago. I don't know how much serious film criticism we're going to be doing on this show, but it should be a lot of fun. We're going to examine the world's 21-year love affair with James Bond, and as only critics get to do, we're going to each pick our favorite James Bond actor, our favorite James Bond film, our favorite Bond villain, our favorite Bond female beauty. But first, Roger begins by trying to answer the question, why have the Bond films been so popular for so long?
Why has James Bond lasted so long? Why is this character ageless? And why do audiences all over the world keep lining up for every new James Bond adventure? Other heroes have been in a lot of movies. I think the record is probably held by Tarzan, as followed by series characters like Charlie Chan and Sherlock Holmes. But those were heroes in low-budget, quickie movies that opened and closed in a few weeks. James Bond has always gone first cabin. From Dr. No in 1962, all the way up to two different Bond movies this year alone, the Bond pictures have been expensive special effects extravaganzas. Not our way to try to answer that question. Let's go back and take a look at the first Bond. Here's Sean Connery 21 years ago in Dr. No.
Suivi.
C'est suivi.
The house will cover the difference.
Bien, madame. Oui, monsieur. Changeur, s'il vous plaît.
Carte.
Carte. 9 à la banque.
I need
Carte.
another 1,000.
I admire your courage, Miss...
Trench. Sylvia Trench. I admire your luck, Mr.
Bond. James Bond.
Mr. Bond, I suppose you wouldn't care to raise the limit?
I have no objection.
Impossible, madame. C'est illégal, monsieur.
Now.
C'est suivi, monsieur.
Looks like you're out to get me.
It's an idea at that.
His first appearance as Bond, and 21 years later, Sean Connery in Never Say Never Again.
Wait a minute. You there?
I shouldn't have the fish.
C'est toujours comme ça ici.
You must have an unreasonable fear of gate crashers to carry this heavy artillery. This bomb has a tiny gyroscope inside. Any lateral movement on your part, and you could be served in an egg cup.
served in an egg cup. I think one thing that's changed over 21 years is that Sean Connery's Scottish accent has gotten just a little bit thicker. I think maybe in those two scenes you get a hint of why James Bond has managed to survive all the gimmicks, all the secret organizations, all the would-be killers and lovers and villains, and all those people that want to control the world. I think it's because of his sense of humor, of the charisma that he takes into a situation, and the self-possession that he has with all those strange things happening around him all the time. The Bond pictures have always been a little ridiculous. I mean, how many megalomaniacs are there who want to control the world? But James Bond always knew they were a little ridiculous, and because he kept his cool and kept his sense of humor, the movies were more than thrillers. They were an exercise in Bond's style, and I think that's what people reacted to, was the style that Bond brought to these situations.
Great style. I can think of three other things. One is, you know, Pauline Kael wrote that book of criticism called Kiss, Kiss, Bang, Bang, those words summing up the essence of movies, sex and violence. Well, these films have a lot of kissing and a lot of gunplay, and it's marvelous. The other thing is chase pictures. These are chase pictures, and they're very well crafted. A lot happens along the chase. We shift locales from land to sea, and we get different villains along the way. The big bad guy has lots of henchmen. The third thing, and it's why any product lasts so well for a long time, why you buy the same dishwashing liquid year after year, it's because of quality control. And you know in the Bond films that you're going to get good-looking stunts, good-looking women, and a great-looking Bond. And that quality control is very important.
I think there's one thing you're leaving out, and that's the gimmicks.
Right.
I remember in one of the very early Bond pictures, remember that Aston Martin that he had?
Yeah.
And he knew
DB5,
that if he pushed that button, you know, that the other seat would eject.
Right.
Well, what they've done in all the pictures is they have the scene right at the beginning where they set off what I would call, or where they plant depth bombs, in a sense, or time bombs, because these toys are demonstrated to Bond, and then we know that half an hour later, or an hour later, or an hour and a half later, he's going to pull out that magic cigarette lighter and wipe the villain out. And so we wait for those things. And all the gimmicks and toys and science fiction kind of effects are lots of fun.
Okay, all good reasons. Coming up next at the movies, will the real James Bond please stand up? A comparison of the three actors who played Bond seriously and our choice for the best.
My name is Bond. James Bond.
What of it?
This is the section of the show where we're going to pick the actor who has played James Bond best, and I'm not going to wait. This is a no-brainer. The best James Bond is Sean Connery. And Roger Ebert, if you disagree with me, I'm going to throw you off the balcony, jump off myself, and step on your head.
I don't think that's going to be necessary.
Okay, thank God. But let's see why, by comparing the three actors who have played 007 over the years, starting with Sean Connery in the classic opening scene from Goldfinger.
He's holding on to the 6 of spades, so I guess he thinks you want it. That last draw was the 8 of hearts. He needs kings and queens. Who are you?
Bond. James Bond.
Come on. Ah, that's more like it.
Now hear this, Goldfinger. Your luck has just changed. I doubt very much if the Miami Beach police would take kindly to what you're doing. Nod your head if you agree. Nod. Good. Now start losing, Goldfinger. Shall we say, $10,000? No, let's be generous. Let's make it 15,000.
May I see?
Well, I can see this is really my day. Jen.
After 5 Bond films, Connery retired and was replaced in 1969 by male model George Lazenby in Honor Her Majesty's Secret Service.
You're full of surprises, Contessa.
So are you, Mr. Bond. Do you always arm yourself for a rendezvous?
Occasionally, I seem to be accident-prone. I'll take that if you don't mind.
You're very sure of yourself, aren't you? Suppose I were to kill you for a thrill.
I can think of something more sociable to do. Let's stop playing games. Who was that man in your room?
You're hurting me.
I thought that was the idea of tonight.
Now, who was he?
I don't know what you're talking about.
I can be a lot more persuasive, Contessa.
George Lazenby lived only once as Bond, then Connery came back for one, and then Roger Moore took over in 1973 in Live and Let Die.
Black Queen on the Red King, Miss...
Solitaire.
My name's Bond. James Bond.
I know who you are, what you are, and why you have come. You have made a mistake. You will not succeed.
Rather a sweeping statement, considering we've never met.
Cards have followed you for me.
Now you get ripped off in Detroit, baby. You yell out to me. You hear?
Is he on?
Can't be too careful in New York City these days. Funny how the least little thing amuses him.
Well, those are our three nominees for Best Performance as James Bond, and I know some Bond nuts are thinking, hey, wait a minute, you forgot about David Niven in the Bond spoof called Casino Royale. Well, we haven't forgotten. It's just that we're analyzing here and criticizing the three guys who played Bond seriously. And is there really any doubt? Connery is smooth and strong, a man's man and a woman's man. Lazenby is a non-entity by comparison. He doesn't cut through the camera at all. All he is now is an answer to a trivia question. As for Roger Moore, he's too prissy, too supercilious, too smug for my taste. I think most men find him to be sort of a fop and a dandy, and I think he's maybe too pretty to be attractive to women. He just isn't rugged enough to convince me that he's a secret agent. Let me put it another way. In his chase scenes, I don't think Roger Moore ever wants to get his nice suit jacket dirty, but I think Sean Connery does. He likes being scruffy and elegant, brave and fashionable. He likes that dirt on that great tuxedo. He could kill and make love in the same afternoon. He's James Bond. Roger Moore is not.
I agree with you on Sean Connery. There will only be one Sean Connery, and he made the role in the first place, and we still identify with him. I think if Robert De Niro went on to All in the Family, people would still miss Carol O'Connor as Archie Bunker. You know what I mean?
I know what you mean.
On the other hand, I think you're being too hard on Roger Moore. I think when I first saw him, I said, well, he's not Sean Connery. I don't see him as James Bond.
Yeah.
He's growing into the role. And also, the early Bond pictures were set closer to the earth, closer to reality. And the later Roger Moore Bond pictures have all of these special effects around them in such a way that I think he has to be kind of distant. So it's kind of one of the jokes is that his tuxedo never gets rumpled. So I think Moore is getting better, and I would look forward to the next Moore picture while still agreeing that Sean Connery is the first and probably only in our hearts James Bond.
Okay, and I think it's because I think he plays a tougher guy, and I think that's what some of this world requires. That's what I think.
Okay, next at the movies, a look at Bond's greatest enemies. We're going to pick the best of the Bond villains. And now the Hall of Infamy, the worst, which is to say the best, James Bond villains. Look at it this way, if it weren't for his enemies, James Bond would be a man with a lot of time on his hands. He'd be talking to Moneypenny all day. And the villains are perhaps the most important single ingredient in a Bond movie after 007 himself. What we have now is our selection of the 4 best villains in all of the Bond movies. And 2 of them come from the same film. That'd be Goldfinger from 1965. And the first villain is Gert Frobe, playing a villain obsessed by gold.
This is gold, Mr. Bond. All my life I've been in love with its color, its brilliance, its divine heaviness. I welcome any enterprise that will increase my stock, which is considerable.
I think you've made your point, Goldfinger. Thank you for the demonstration.
Choose your next witticism carefully, Mr. Bond. It may be your last.
Harold Sakata played Goldfinger's hired killer, Oddjob, the man who wore a guillotine on his head.
I see that it is necessary to remind you. Oddjob! Many people have tried to involve themselves in my affairs, unsuccessfully.